Hello everybody, Floppy Waffle 69 here, and welcome back to the channel. Hey guys, today we are concluding and finishing up our Down the Line series featuring the HMS Daring, and this is indeed the crown jewel of the branch, HMS Daring herself. Guys, this is a DD, in my opinion, that isn't talked about enough in the game for its just absolute consistency and what it can do on the battlefield. I feel this DD is severely underrated amongst the masses of players, but very well respected to players who know the game. I know I've talked about this in previous videos with going down the line here, that when I see, a Jutland, a Lightning, a Daring, I do kind of go, oh, fuck, I have to deal with this ship, because these ships are just so good at what they do. The defensive mindset that these DDs bring is different from a lot of other DDs that you get in the game. And their flexibility on the battlefield puts them above, I would say, the vast majority of other DDs. And as we all know, Tier 10 is an extremely competitive tier for DDs. And this ship still finds its way in at least my top 5 list for sure, and it should be in your top 10 at a minimum for DDs that are capable of not only dealing damage but spotting, just being that lethal DD killer, torpedo threat, kind of like the Swiss Army knife out there, no pun intended at all. So like we always do with these down the line videos, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some soft stats, and I am going to talk about some tips and tricks with her, and then I'm going to go ahead and show a replay in her and do my final thoughts about her, just to kind of summarize what the ship is and what she can do effectively. And a little bit of a side note here, for in the intro and all that stuff, and the music and all that stuff, that is only going to be now featured in down the line videos. I'm going to start moving away from that when it comes to ship analysis videos, just because I have some different plans that I'm going to try to execute when it comes to those. I'm just going to go ahead and show more gameplay in the background of those ships, because I understand where the down the line series is more time invested in regards of grinding certain said tech tree ships and working your way down to the tier 10 or even the super ships. Premium ships are just that one all buy all with either in-game resources, hard-earned cash, or whatever. So I'm just going to try to do a better job of getting the message across quicker and more effectively than I am right now for those. But with that aside, let's go ahead and get on into the ship analysis. Now, obviously, the first thing that you're going to notice about the Daring is that there are 2 other types of Daring class DDs in the game, or that share the pretty much identical hull with the Daring. That is the Druid and the Vampire 2. Now, both are found within the Research Bureau, so if you want to play the Daring or a Daring class style of ship, the only way you're really going to be able to do that is just by playing for free, because this is a tech line ship. If you want to get a more premium version of the Daring with a little bit of quirks and a little bit of different play styles, then yeah, those are the 2 ships you're going to have to do. You're going to have to regrind around, I believe, is it 5 to 6 lines to go ahead and get one of those 2 ships. And eventually down the road, I will go ahead and do a ship analysis analysis of those ships as well. But again, we're moving slow and steady, and I'm just trying to check all the boxes that I can. Obviously, I know the new update just dropped, A Decade at Sea, so I don't want to spend too much time doing down the line series and all that, because there's a bunch of new ships I want to go ahead and take a look at for you guys, so that if you're deciding to either put the time invested to earn the ship or the money to go ahead and put forth on the ship, I'm making sure you understand kind of what you're getting, because sometimes I think my opinions are a little bit different than what the vast majority of players think. So that's why I want to go ahead and make sure I get those to you guys ASAP. But right now we're on the Daring, so we are going to be focusing on the Daring. And first thing that we always do is you go ahead and look at the armor scheme, which hasn't really changed. It's progressed the same like all DD lines do across the game, across the board here. The armor scheme hasn't changed. This is your standard run-of-the-mill armor scheme for destroyers, your 19mm nose, your 19mm armor midsection, and your 19mm aft end plating. Again, this is very standard, so there's nothing changing with armor values here. Any and all HEAP will go ahead and penetrate this particular said ship. Going into the survivability, we have 20,800 HP. In regards of HP, that sits kind of in the middle of the road. I mean, the lowest obviously being to the Submers at 17,300, and the highest, the all spanking, all brand new, whatever you want to call the, we're just going to call it the Babriano. I don't want to say the beginning part because I'm going to butcher that to shit. But again, keep in mind that the raw HP pool of the Daring at 20,800 obviously is going to be altered due to survivability expert, which is going to be 300 or 350, potentially 450, depending on certain commanders, legendary or whatnot, times it by 10. So you're going to have an addition of that much HP in total, which again, I recommend if you have a commander that gets the survivability bonus, probably not a bad idea to go ahead and sauce them on a tier 10 DD, just because it's going to give you that little bit of an edge when it comes to DD on DD conflict. Also, we have to factor in the heal that this thing does have. The Daring does have a heal that I guess it's pretty standard, nothing too special here. You do get 2 charges base, action time of 10 seconds, and you're healing around 208 HP per second. So, and a cooldown is 80 seconds. This is nice, especially because we saw this on the Jutland, and now we get that here with the Daring. So it's going to allow us a little bit of a safety net to help mitigate some unwanted damage that we have, that we maybe will take with the first initial DD engagement in the game, right? Whereas other ships like the Vampire, they don't have that. They have other tools, but where trades are more vital. Whereas if the Daring doesn't come out on top on some trades, it's not too big of a deal, as he has a little bit of a heal to help him out. Where other ships, like it's crucial. It's really detrimental if they lose a lot of HP earlier on in the game. That's going to affect the way they play the game for the rest of the 20-minute game, that battle, I guess, so to speak, right? So keep that in mind as well. Moving on into the artillery, and this is the 3x2 113mm gun. This is the same or similar gun that we saw on the Jutland, but this is going to be the same caliber of shell. Reload time is 2.5 seconds with a 180-degree turn time of 8.3 seconds. I believe the turrets are 360 degrees, so that is nice and super flexible. Maximum range is 12.8 kilometers. Going into the HE, we have 17,000 raw HE damage with an 8% fire chance, which is very nice. They can go ahead and penetrate 19 millimeters of armor. Going into the AP, it is clocking in at 2,100 damage for the armor piercing. And also, you want to keep in mind that the AP shells do have the improved ricochet angles at 60 to 68 degrees with the shortened fuse time, not short fuse, but shortened of the 0.010 seconds for the armor piercing, which is making this AP incredibly useful, especially on DD engagements. A couple things to keep in mind here with the Daring's armament of its main battery, right? We have a maximum range of 12.8 kilometers, but only an initial shell velocity of 746, and that's for the armor piercing and the HE. These are floatier shells, so I guess extending the range, in my opinion, isn't warranted, because this thing may be more of a hybrid in between of it, but leaning more towards the gun-focused builds. I still wouldn't extend the range. That's 4 points that is going to be very bleh at best, because you still want to get in a little bit closer to make sure you're consistently landing shells on target, rather than just spraying and praying at maximum range. So just my take on this ship. Again, if you are different, you differ from me, then hey, by all means, go ahead and take that 4-point skill. 8% fire chance is very, very spicy. If you happen to take Demo Expert to get up to 9 and the 2 signal flags to get it up to 10, that's 10%. That's pretty freaking impressive. This thing is getting a raw base HE fire chance. I guess fires a minute at 10.3. The Vampire is coming in just a little bit higher at 11.5 with identical fire chance, but it is reloading just a little bit faster. That's the only reason why, right? One thing to note about the 113 millimeter gun here with the HE gun in particular, that is only 19 millimeters of armor the HE can pen on this thing. That is why, especially with the Jutland I was talking about, you're going to want to make use of that armor piercing more often than not. So please get used to switching between the shell types because it's going to be better. You're going to actually find yourself killing DDs, doing more raw damage to ships, especially if it's the right scenario, right? That's the one caveat. By switching to that armor piercing, because HE most of the time it's just going to shatter, and then at that point you're basically just relying on fire damage to do most of your damage, which isn't always the most reliable in this game, as we've seen, right? There is a time and a place. So going into the torpedoes, and this is obviously pretty nice, right? This is the 2x5, nice, we like seeing that, a 533 millimeter launcher. They do go and travel 10 kilometers. It takes them about just over 2 minutes to reload at 125 seconds. The damage is not too bad either, not too shabby at 16,767, traveling around 65 knots, particularly a range of 1.3 kilometers. Now, the reason it's 65 knots is because in that third upgrade slot, I am taking that torpedo armament, whatever upgrade. The reason for that is I'm just looking to increase my speed, I believe from 62, is it, or 61 up to 65. I just find, and I've tried using the aiming system, I'm not really benefiting that much from the aiming system. I'm usually reliably hitting all my shells anyways, so I'm not really getting the dispersion buff that I need, so to speak. Also, the speed of the torpedoes was kind of lackluster, so this is helping me get to my torpedoes, or my torpedoes landing to the, landing on target more reliably. And I actually have noticed a little bit of a difference. I am landing torpedoes more reliably with the little faster torpedoes, so that's why I take it. And because my main battery gun's already spewing shells out every 2.5 seconds, so I really don't feel like if I miss a couple shells here or there, I'm really not like, oh fuck, right? Like where other ships need that, the Daring, in my opinion, doesn't really need that, because mainly you're going to be finding DDs, knife fighting DDs around like 6, 7, 8 kilometers anyways, and I'm usually hitting my shells at that range. So really no need to go ahead and take the aiming systems mod, at least in my opinion. Depth charges, I've mentioned this throughout the entire line. The Daring line is incredibly good at hunting enemy submarines with that 5,000 maximum damage on the bombs. 2 charges with 16 bombs in each charge. Super nice. Again, with that hydroacoustic search, doing a shift detect of 3 kilometers and hydro and geno when subs are fully submerged, that 2 kilometer to detect as well. Well, the Daring has that, so you know exactly when to go ahead and drop your depth charges. The only thing that's really going to hurt the Daring when it comes to hunting submarines is the lack of speed, and we'll get to that in a minute, but obviously subs do hum underwater and can, I guess, go to periscope depth and keep you spotted, especially if they surface, they get you to shoot and you can't fall off with that smoke. They will submerge again, and then you're basically a fish out of water at that point. So you do have to use caution in your brain when engaging submarines. You're more of a middle to late game submarine hunter than you are early game. Of course, unless the submarine just is an absolute dumbass and overextends, then of course take full advantage of that. The AA defense, I mean, it's all right. I don't want to get in there and get, really splitting hairs saying if this AA is really worth it or not. Because there are a couple destroyers in the game where the AA is going to be incredibly effective, and the Daring for me is not really one of them. I mean, you can smoke up, shoot down a couple planes, you can defend yourself enough against fighters to shoot them down in a relative quick manner. But again, they're not that reliable AA platforms, so don't expect to be shooting down any planes or defending yourself from strikes, right? You still have to be careful. Your best defense in the Daring is your short burst smoke generators to fall off detection and hide from the enemy CV planes than it is to actually try to maneuver and dodge enemy aircraft. Though you can do that with the engine propulsion mod and like the built-in engine acceleration and juking, you can do it. It is kind of tricky, but again, wouldn't really recommend. That is a skill you're going to have to master over time the more familiar you come with playing the Daring in this line in general. The maneuverability, 35 knots top speed, turning circle radius of 630 meters, and a rudder shift time of 3.7. Obviously, the rudder shift time is upgraded just because I have the rudder shift mod in that slot, because we already have the baked-in acceleration. And speaking about the baked-in acceleration, the Daring just falls ever so short in the acceleration department. I mean, by what, 0.2 seconds behind the Vampire has 7.4, where the Daring has 7.6. Is it going to be that noticeable? No. It's going to feel almost identical if you're playing the two. So really no reason to really get wrapped up in talking about the pros and the cons of that. And then going into the concealment, obviously I mount the concealment module on this thing. Detection by sea base is 7.37. You take the concealment module, it gets you down to 6.6 kilometers. You slot the commander skill, concealment expert, and it gives you down to 6 kilometers, which is outstanding. That is very, very usable and allows you to sneak around and creep up on enemy DDs and other ships to go ahead and execute torpedo strikes, or again catch surprise those enemy destroyers to give you a little bit of an edge in the conflict that's going to ensue usually towards the beginning of the game for capture points. The Daring is an excellent cap contender with its stealth, hydroacoustic search, and raw DPM, and its short burst smoke generators. The only thing really detrimental to it is the speed, because it takes you a little bit to get there, so therefore it's going to take you a little bit to disengage. You can get run down on this thing too. It has happened, especially against those faster, quicker destroyers like the Kleber and the Marceau, and just to name a couple. So you're going to have situational awareness and know where those ships are at all times to make sure that the engagement is swayed in your favor. So anyways, guys, that is the Daring in a nutshell. I actually love this DD. As you know, with this whole Down the Line series, this is my one recommendation for newer destroyer players to say, hey, I want to try DDs out. Which line do I try? Boom, the Daring line. And why is that? I'll reiterate it one more time here at the tier 10 level. I think it's flexible. It only has good guns, but it has usable torpedoes. The tech tree itself scales very well. It means no real ship is like detrimental. It's like, ooh, this is a sore thumb or a sore spot in the line. Every ship in the line is fun to play and should be a good experience for the most part. And it scales very well with your own skill level. I think that the better you become at DDs, and especially with Royal Navy DDs, the better you'll play in general with this ship. Where some ships, it takes a hot minute to really learn how to play the ship. And even then, it's like pretty hard to play compared to other DDs in the game. So the Daring, in my opinion, will always stay relevant. And again, we're going to see how well that ages, but it should always stay relevant and be a good contender for either competitive randoms, co-ops, operations, whatever you want to play with her. She's just an excellent ship all around. So, but again, guys, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the gameplay with the Daring and show you all what she can do. Alrighty, guys, and here we are in battle with the HMS Daring. Now, obviously, I want to point out I am in a division, okay? But, like I've talked about previously in this channel, a destroyer review with a battleship division mate, it's not really going to sway or construe any of the results that I'm going to get in this ship, just because where I want to emphasize this particular ship in regards of like destroyer engagements or whatnot, he's only going to be able to help maybe a salvo or two, where, I mean, yes, it can sway the engagement in my favor. I'm not saying that it can't, but it's not as impactful as if I was in another DD division or a cruiser DD division. You know what I'm trying to say? Again, my spotting will allow him to hit specific larger said ships and, help me out in that regard and the team in that regard. But again, not really on the things that I want to talk about or what I want to showcase with the Daring view. And there's a lot to talk about with the ship. And the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the captain build. As you can see, I am utilizing the RPF skill. Now, why am I utilizing the RPF skill? Because I'm pretty sure I said, well, you don't really need it on the Jutland. Okay, but I said if you feel comfortable, you can utilize it and move those point skills or those skill points around. And for me, the Daring, and why I take RPF on the Daring is because Tier 10 is its own whole ball game, guys. Tier 10 is a completely different animal, and I think I need it to showcase where that nearest DD is, which allows me to play and emphasize more of that destroyer, that DD destroyer role. DD destroyer role. Defensive DD role. Fuck. I'm sorry. English. Which allows me to keep in mind of like ships like the Hoffman and all these ships, so I know where they're going to be, so it allows me to get that first strike off. Immediately switching to the armor piercing, and you're going to see, because he has an improved armor scheme, it's going to allow me to chunk him for 3,700 damage. Please, please, please make use of this AP. But now we're kind of balls deep. We understand he has the hydroacoustic search, so we're going to go ahead and disengage as quick as possible. And again, this is why that initial DD engagement, we have a heal, which is nice. Sadly, I'm still spotted, but hey, it's okay. No big deal. We're gonna fall off, maybe pop our heal, no big deal. Actually, I'm amazed I didn't lose more HP, so good for me there. Obviously we know he has Hydro, so I'm not planning on these torpedoes to hit, but one strategy I like using in the Daring, guys, is I like launching my one rack like normal spread, but then I like doing the single launch torpedoes to kind of constray where he's going to be able to go. And he sees, look, basically I think he saw these torpedoes and he thought he could fit in between the gap. He just got too horny and too locked in with his reticle, and he didn't realize he was reversing right into my torpedoes. So hey, I will take that. I'm not going to complain. But that is a strategy I like to do. So my first tip with the Daring is don't just launch all single launch torpedoes, of course, unless the scenario showcases it, like they're nose on you reversing. And don't just launch your two normal spread racks either. If you, especially with DDs and smoke, you can do that one rack and then go ahead and switch to single launches. And I just somehow find that I get more and more DD hits and smoke and founders by doing that. So again, might sound stupid, like Floppy, you're speaking out of your ass, but I'm telling you, it's like one of those things that just works. Okay, it just works. So give it a try and tell me what you guys think. Okay, but yeah, I want to talk about the captain build. So you can see that I use RPF, and right there was a prime example of why I want to take RPF, and it allows me basically always to have my guns locked on the sector that I know the enemy ship is closest to me, and it also allows me to throw out my torpedoes in a general vicinity to know where potentially that ship can run into it, basically is what I'm trying to say. It also allows me to have the flexibility because I know I'm a slower DD, so I can pre-plan my moves a little bit easier, which makes it a really effective and maybe emphasize what it's trying to do, which is playing in more of a defensive manner. As you can see, I'm locking down the B cap, I'm spotting for my team, providing vision, which is always what you want to be doing at DD regardless, but the Daring is pretty exceptional at that. Again, I have to keep in mind not only where all the destroyers are at, but where the radar is at too, because if I get caught balls deep in a radar, I'm pretty fucked, honestly, unless I'm already disengaging at that point. But if I'm deep, like in a Des Moines or Worcester radar, like 8 kilometers, like, dude, I'm pretty much toast, right? So you have to tread with caution and be careful, guys. Obviously, another thing I'm not taking is Fearless Brawler, and this is probably a skill that's like, Floppy, this is retarded. Why are you not taking Fearless Brawler? In my opinion, Fearless Brawler only adds 10% of your base value, so of 2.5 with the reload mod added to that skill. The reload mod added in that slot 6 plus the Fearless Brawler. I just think it's too much emphasis on the main battery, and I think my reload time of 2.5 is already fast enough. I don't need to get that down to like what 2.2, 2.3 or whatever it's gonna be. I think it's wasted 4 points, so I go ahead and move those 4 points somewhere else. That's basically my thought process. You have to factor it. Don't just do cookie cutter builds. Really understand and decipher the ship itself, and then try to build a captain build designed around that ship to really emphasize its pros and try to mitigate its cons. That's kind of something that I really like. And I really don't take advice too much from other players. Like, I've had some inspirational players or some inspiration from other players that have kind of showcased me other builds, and I try them out. But again, if the build doesn't work for you, then don't suffer through trying to utilize that build. Find a build that works for you and stick with it, because at the end of the day, as long as you're finding success in the build that you've chosen, then you're most likely going to be effective for your team. Because if you're not, then you're detrimental, you're usually dying, and then that's one less DD or ship down for your team, and we don't want that, right? So that's basically pretty much the captain build. Those are the 2 main skill points that I wanted to highlight, because I think up till this point, I've recommended Fearless Brawler and not really recommended RPF, and now I've switched it for the tier 10. So if you've been keeping up a commander skill going all the way up to the tier 10, obviously it's going to be different, but I always design captains for the specific said ship instead of just copy paste them on all my ships like a lot of these players do with their legendary commanders. I just find it not to be a fun playstyle, and I think they're really dumbing down the game, and I don't think you should do that. In just my opinion, I don't think you should do that. Yes, I'm not saying the legendary commanders aren't good and they don't give you a significant advantage, and that's why a lot of these players are doing it, okay? Clearly, that's why they're doing it, okay? I understand that, but I'm saying for, like, in general, for the captain build, minus the, I guess, talents that can be procced, you should design your captain build for the specific said ship rather than just these cookie cutter builds that you just carry from one ship to the next. You know what I mean? That's all I'm trying to say. Okay. Next thing about the Daring that I want to talk about, that I don't think she's like mentioned a whole lot about, is the legendary mod. Now, before I'd usually mention the legendary mod in the beginning with the sick music and all that jazz. Well, no. I wanted to mention it here, okay? There are some legendary mods that are just flat out a buff to the ship. Like an example of that would be, in my opinion, would be like the Colombo. There are some legendary mods that are just fucking shit that you would never utilize in the game, and there are some mods that are side grades that are like, it just kind of changes the overall play style of the ship. It really doesn't do anything, but like if you wanted to try a new way to play the ship, this is what you'd want to do. And I think the Daring is a side grade at the I mean, that's giving it credit. I'll be honest with you. Would I recommend the legendary mod? No, I would not recommend the legendary mod, because you're sacrificing concealment in that 5th slot, and your concealment becomes 6.6 kilometers, and that is way too high for how slow as this ship is, just to become a torpedo boat that shoots torpedoes at 65 knots potentially, or lower, depending on certain captain skills, and that only goes 10 kilometers, right? And I just don't think it's worth it at that point, just to get that extra raw buff to your torpedo reload and your torpedo damage. The Daring is not a torpedo destroyer. If you solely play the Daring as a torpedo destroyer, I got news for you. Go play another DD, because there are going to be other DDs that just emphasize that torpedo role better than the Daring, and at this point it would just be wasted. You're not going to find success in a torpedo legendary mod Daring. Consistent success, maybe I should switch it. Every now and then you'll have a game where it's like, yeah, fucking right, it rocks ass. But for the vast majority of the time, you're not going to find success in a torpedo legendary mod Daring. It's just not the way to play the ship, okay? And that's why I recommended her to beginning players, like new DD players, is because it's an all-around good destroyer at what it does. Like, it's one of those DDs where you're not going to win any awards, so to speak. And you're good at some things, but you're not great at everything. But you're really not bad at anything either. You're kind of that run-of-the-mill solid DD. I know I've heard some people say the ship is overpowered, and I've had some people say the ship is kind of ass. In my opinion, the ship is not overpowered, clearly. I think that's just a like funny meme that people say. I think this DD is quite strong, and I think she can be quite strong, but I do think people kind of play her the wrong way. They don't utilize her guns enough, and they try to overutilize the torpedoes. This ship needs to make use of its guns. And that's why it has short burst smoke generators, not only to fall off detection, but so it can pop it, farm a little bit, and then fall off. You can really min-max with fires and floods and catch a lot of ships off guard with your armor piercing, so you're going to need to do that, okay? So going into my final thoughts here about the Daring, because this was kind of a quicker replay, and I'm sorry, guys. It's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. The Daring is a solid all-around DD. I think she, like I said, she scales very well with the player's skill of not only destroyers, but with Royal Navy destroyers as well. She has the improved acceleration. She has the hydroacoustic search. She has all the tools at her disposal to be a very, very scary menace on the seas. But her big drawback is her speed. So you're going to have to position accordingly. This is going to be one of those DDs where positioning is even further emphasized and even more important than other destroyers, where some DDs can get away with it, right? Because they're just so fucking fast or whatever. The Daring, I mean, yes, it has the short burst smoke generator, but in regards of planes just hovering over you, you're lower than average speed. It's going to be hard. You're going to be getting run down at times. It's going to be hard, so you're going to have to position accordingly, right? With that being said, the improved acceleration makes her, it just is awesome. I think it allows her a little bit of flexibility, and that gives her survivability, because you can throw a lot of ship's shells and shots off with that. So make sure you learn how to engine juke and rudder juke properly, because again, it'll mitigate a lot of damage by learning how to do so. And again, the torpedoes, you can single launch them. This is a UK trait. You don't want to just dump your entire single launch load at one time, because ships change speed and course, and you're going to do is you're going to miss all your torpedoes, and it'll be a waste of a torpedo strike. So keep that in mind, guys. But anyways, guys, to sum it up, love the Daring. Excellent ship. Can't recommend this ship enough, because I feel like this ship is one of those ships that just isn't talked about enough or played enough in this game, guys. So I will leave you on the post-battle screen. Again, run-of-the-mill game, nothing too spectacular, but again, what can be achieved? You can see the greatness that can be achieved in this game. So make sure you make full use of this ship and go out in the 7 seas and dominate, guys. I will see myself out. Stay tuned for more videos to come, and happy hunting, captains, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.